My name is Alex, and I swear every word I'm about to tell you is the truth. I didn't believe in curses or hauntings, at least not until I saw what happened to Rachel. Rachel was my best friend. We grew up together in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened. She loved antique shops, always searching for unique trinkets. One rainy afternoon, she dragged me into this dusty old store at the edge of town. The air smelled like mildew and forgotten memories. The shelves were stacked with books, porcelain figurines, and strange objects I couldn't identify. And then we saw it. The doll sat on a high shelf near the counter. It wasn't pretty, like the ones you see in toy stores. Its face was porcelain, cracked in places, and its glass eyes were unnervingly lifelike. The body was made of cloth, dressed in a faded, frilly Victorian gown. A tattered ribbon was tied around its neck, as if someone had tried to hide a flaw beneath it. Rachel was mesmerized. "It's perfect," she said. I didn't like it. Something about the doll felt wrong. Its eyes seemed to follow us as we moved around the store. I told Rachel to leave it, but she laughed and bought it anyway. That was the beginning of everything. When we got back to her house, Rachel placed the doll on a shelf in her bedroom. She named it Lila. I teased her about it, but she didn't care. For the next few days, Rachel acted like the doll was her prized possession. She even said it made her feel calm, like it had some kind of energy. But soon, strange things started happening. The first time, Rachel called me in the middle of the night. Her voice was shaky. "I think someone's been in my room," she said. She told me she'd woken up to find the doll lying on her bed, even though she was sure she'd left it on the shelf. "Maybe you moved it and forgot," I said, but she insisted she hadn't touched it. The next day I came over to check things out. The doll was back on the shelf, staring out the window. I tried to ignore the way its eyes seemed to gleam in the sunlight. Rachel looked pale, like she hadn't slept. "I've been hearing things at night," she said. "Whispers, footsteps. But when I check, there's nothing there." I told her she was imagining things, but deep down I wasn't so sure. A week later, Rachel's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, jumpy. She stopped answering my calls. When I finally went to her house, she looked different. Her eyes were sunken and her hands trembled when she spoke. "I think it's the doll," she whispered. "It's doing something to me." "What are you talking about?" I asked. She hesitated, then pulled me to her closet. Inside was a shoebox filled with old papers and photographs. She explained that she'd been researching the doll's history. "It's cursed," she said. "It belonged to a little girl named Clara back in the 1800s. Clara died under mysterious circumstances, and the doll disappeared. Until now." I stared at the papers. One of them was a death certificate for Clara, dated 1887. Cause of death, unknown. "That doesn't mean anything," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Rachel shook her head. "It's more than that. I found an old diary. Clara's father wrote it. He said the doll talked to her, made her do things. He tried to get rid of it, but it always came back. I told her she needed to get rid of the doll, but Rachel refused. She said it wouldn't let her." The next few days were a blur. Rachel's condition worsened. She started hearing voices, seeing shadows in the corners of her room. She told me the doll was moving on its own, appearing in different places around the house. One night, I decided to stay over. I didn't believe Rachel, but I wanted to prove she was imagining things. That was the worst night of my life. We were sitting in her room talking when the lights flickered. The air grew cold, and the doll, sitting on the shelf, seemed to smile. I swear its expression changed. Rachel screamed and pointed at the doll. "It's here! It's watching us!" I grabbed the doll and threw it into the closet. For a moment, everything was silent. Then we heard it. A faint, childlike giggle coming from inside the closet. We bolted out of the house. The next morning, Rachel called me, panicked. The doll was back on the shelf, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I'm going to burn it." I drove to her house, but when I got there, it was too late. The front door was wide open. I found Rachel in her room, lying on the floor. She wasn't breathing. The doll was sitting next to her, its porcelain face cracked in a way that looked almost like a sinister grin. The police ruled it as a sudden cardiac arrest, but I knew the truth. The doll had killed her. I couldn't let it end there. I took the doll and drove out to the woods, determined to destroy it. I built a fire and threw the doll into the flames. For a moment, I thought I heard a scream, high-pitched and inhuman, as the flames consumed it. But when I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The doll was sitting on the hood of my car, completely unharmed. I don't know how I made it home that night. I've tried everything, burning it, burying it, even sinking it in the river. It always comes back. Now, it's sitting on my shelf, watching me as I write this. If you're reading this, consider it a warning. Some things are meant to stay buried. And if you ever see a doll like Lila, don't take it home. You might not be as lucky as I've been.